Welcome back to Capital Market here on Channels Television. Well, foreign investors operating in the oil and gas industry are lending their voice now to the deregulation of the upstream and downstream markets owing to the thinning margin they are now experiencing in the operation. But given the 34.36% year-to-date loss seen on the major NSE-listed oil and gas marketing firms, the chief executive of OVH Energy, Mr. Stockman, tells us what the federal government has got to do to be able to liberalize the markets.
I think what we saw is post-elections that the business was improving. I think the elections made a lot of people maybe slow down a little bit, do a little bit less activity. But what we've seen post-elections is that actually activity is picking up, irrespective if it's in the fuel or in the lubricants business or in the gas business. So actually post-elections business has been going well.
The fiscal authorities certainly have appointed some ministers now, and of course, we're yet to see their portfolio. But how much of expectations do you have around this government in terms of the oil and gas industry?
Well, I think as a downstream player, of course, the big thing that we're waiting for is some clarity around deregulation of the market, of the premium motor spirits market. And of course we have high hopes that the new government will tackle this.
But why will it be necessary to actually really deregulate the industry?
Well, a lot of the deregulation that has been discussed is of course around the upstream business. However, as a downstream, we also have an important element in it, which is called the deregulation of the premium motor spirits market, which of course, and it's all about creating a level playing field. And I think it's very clear that a lot of economists, analysts, civil societies say it's time we do this because the money that is actually spent on subsidy or under recovery, however you want to call it, could be spent better on health, education, electricity infrastructure. So, but of course, the government has its responsibility. They want to make sure they talk to all stakeholders to make sure they take the right decision when they take it. So we might still have to wait a little bit, but I'm sure they will tackle the issue.
We've got the PIB, the Petroleum Industrial Bill, yet to be implemented, even though we had the PIGB. You think there's a possibility of achieving deregulation without the PIB?
I think the PIB creates a framework, and I think as an international investor, especially also in the upstream, you want a regulatory framework that allows you to invest long term. Which is actually the same in a downstream business. You want a regulatory framework that gives you some security, some confidence that whatever you invest, you can recoup that investment. For that you need legislation. So of course you could try to do it without legislation, but that usually only creates uncertainty. So regulation actually helps us to build a basis for our investments.
So analysts have also often argued that the Dangoty Refinery will be a major solution to the issue of regulation. You think we should hold on till that comes on stream or not?
I think the Dangoty Refinery is a brilliant infrastructural project for Nigeria. It could potentially make Nigeria from a net importer of oil products a net exporter. But it's still a couple of years away. It's not fully clear yet when it will be 100% operational. But it will have a big impact on, let's say, the oil industry in itself. Coupling, let's say, an on-stream coming of Dangoty Refinery to potentially a liberalization of the market is what some people say that would be a logical way of doing it. But I think, given the fact that it might still be several years away, I hope that actually the government intervenes before Dangoty goes fully live.
Why should that be?
Because the industry is marred with thinning margins. So we are trying to survive with thinning margins. Now, some people say, well, you can live on thinning margins, but what it prevents us is to invest in global standards on health and safety, in operational excellence, in improving the customer offer, in investing in the education of our staff in a wider view. So in my view it actually is hampering or limiting the investments that the industry actually needs to become world-class. There are numbers being quoted on what is spent on, let's say, the subsidy or the under-recovery on the premium motor spirits, and the numbers range to up to 1 trillion naira. I think that's a lot of money that could be spent very well also on education, on health and other things. Also, if you look at it from an economic point of view, often it's better to basically support production versus consumption. And what you're doing with basically the subsidy is you're actually supporting consumption, while production is long-term. It will bring you long-term ahead. So I think from a purely long-term economic view, I think it would be wise to actually deregularize or to liberalize the downstream market.
Is there any possible impacts you see deregulation having on inflation for Nigeria? Because this is a country, a frontier market, just edging out of about an all-time high level of inflation.
I'm not sure what the impact will be of inflation, and I'm sure there are lots of economists that can give it a better view. However, if you look at the Nigerian economy, quite a bit of products and services are being, or especially products are being imported. So actually the price of a lot of products, and thus inflation, is actually determined outside Nigeria. And exchange rate also plays a role in that. Don't forget, once product land in Nigeria, a lot of it will be transported by road, i.e. and the trucks take diesel. Diesel is already a deregulated product. If you look at manufacturing, a lot of the backup electricity is actually generated through generators that run on diesel. So there might be some impact, but for me it's very unclear how much that impact would be.
So the GMD of the NNPC yesterday talked about, self-sufficiency by the year 2023. How does this particular issue at hand, deregulation, liberalization, speak to this particular target?
Well, I think if Nigeria, with the Dangoty Refinery, but also its other refineries, don't forget there are also other refineries that are present in Nigeria, there is enough capacity to basically supply the local market. But if you look at refineries, they will always look at the alternative they can get for their product. Because they are big investments. So I would, as an investor in a refinery, you would always say, okay, I can get X for the product locally, and I can get Y for the product if I export it. Now, then that becomes a little bit of an economic question, of course. If I can get more when I export it, yeah, is that then the right thing to do for the refinery in itself? Yeah. So, but with the right economic environment, i.e. in my view, or in our view as moment, a liberalized downstream market, actually that question becomes far less difficult to answer. Because you've got a market which is sitting on your doorstep. So there's always a benefit of then putting the product locally into the market.
So as a foreign investor, what are your thoughts on what is playing out on the global stage, US-China trade wars, as its impacts on global oil markets? Now we've got Brent or thereabout, less than $60 per barrel.
I think what the world always likes is a little bit of stability. So any trade war is always bad for business, if you know what I mean. It hampers growth, it makes currencies fluctuate, and also it impacts potential demand for instance, oil products, because people have uncertainty. And when there's uncertainty, people do not invest. When there's uncertainty, people don't increase maybe consumption. So for me, the world is always benefited, and the economy is always benefited with some kind of predictability and stability. And usually these kind of rhetorics don't necessarily might help that ambition. I think from a deregulation point of view, you would take away the need for subsidizing the product, which means you can then spend the money on things like healthcare, education, electricity infrastructure, which I think would be of great benefit to all Nigerians too. I think that's the first thing. From a fiscal point of view, I would say what any business always says: don't overburden the business with multiple regulations and tax fairly. But that's, I think, any businessman would say that.
Well, there's so much more you should continue to watch out for on Channels Television, this particular space, and in the world of capital market next week. Next week, we know that the Securities and Exchange Commission will be collaborating with the University of Lagos to hold a capital market conference, some kind of capacity building strategy there. And of course, Infinity Mortgage Bank, this is a listed mortgage company in the Nigerian Stock Exchange, will be holding its facts behind the figures session. All of these details will, one way or the other, be made available to you on Capital Market and, of course, right here on Channels Television. But that's it on the program for this evening. Thank you for watching. I'm Temple Ashaju. I'll see you next time.